Meow. Oh. Oh. Hello. Hello. Meow. My name is Percy. I'm Goodman's cousin. I was told that I need to tell or read a book. Oh. Well, this is right here. Wow. The Book of Fairies. Selected. Hold on. And illustrated by Michael Haig. Okay. Oh, hold on. Wow. Alright. I'm going to start. Well, so Goodman, if you're wondering, wow, he is at the cousin's house. Hall, with Chicago, Goodman Sr. and Alice. So he's not going to be back anytime soon. So I'll be telling you, a story. So anyways, and with the help of Alex, flipping pages. Oh, okay. You can yell me. Yeah. Alright. So, yeah, let's get started. Alright. So, wow. Ooh, kind of interesting. Baby there. Bunch of fairies. Something I chase. Kind of looks like some pancakes. Right there. Wow. What's that sound? The Book of Fairies. Ooh, look at his nose. That's a funny looking nose. Wow. Alright, let's continue. Contents, don't care about that. I mean, I do, but... Oh, look, there's a baby right there. You see the baby? You can kind of see his butt crack. Straight up. Anyways. Lockout Time. From Peter Pan in Kensington Gardens by J.M. Barrie. Alright, you ready? Get settled and cozy. We're starting now. Meow. It is frightfully difficult to know much about the fairies, and almost the only thing known for certain is that there are fairies wherever there are children. Long ago, children were forbidden the gardens, and at the time there was not a fairy in place. Then the children were admitted. The fairies came trooping in that very evening. They can't resist following the children, but you seldom see them, partly because they live in the daytime, behind the railings, where you are not allowed to go, and also partly because they are so cunning. They are not a bit cunning after lockout, but until lockout, my word, when you were a bird you knew the fairies pretty well, and you remember a good deal about them in your babyhood, which it is a great pity you can't write. Very interesting. Wow. I do remember when I was a little kitten and stuff. My mom, she used to tell us about fairies and stuff, and we tried making things, and then my uncle ate a fairy and he got cursed. I mean, this might be a real story. I was only told this when I was little. and his stomach was hurting for like a couple days, and when he went to the bathroom, he said he like gave like it was pretty bad. I mean, it was like the biggest hairball you've ever seen. Wow. Anyways. Oh my god. Well, this is quite big text right here. I mean, it's a lot, but there are pictures, and that's good. Anyways. Down for gradually you forgot, and I've heard of children who declared they had never once seen a fairy. Very likely, if they said this in the Kensington Gardens, they were standing looking at a fairy all the time. Now, the reason they were cheated was that she pretended to be something else. This is one of their best tricks. They usually pretend to be flowers, because the court sits in the fairy's base, and there are so many flowers there, and all along the baby walk. Now, that a flower is the thing least likely to attract attention. They dress exactly like flowers, change with the seasons, putting on white when lilies are in the blue for bluebells, and so on. They like crocus and hyacinth, time best of all, as they are partial to the bit of colour, but tulips, except white ones, which are fairy cradles, they considered garish. They sometimes put off dressing like tulips for days, so that the beginning of the tulip weeks are almost the best time to catch them. Meow. When they think you are not looking, they skip along pretty lively, but if you look and they fear there is no time to hide, they stand quite still, pretending to be flowers. Then, after you have passed without knowing that they were fairies, they rush home to tell their mothers they have had such an adventure. The fairy basin, you remember, is all covered with ground ivy, from which they make the castor oil, with flowers growing in and here and there. Most of them are flowers, but some of them are fairies. You never can be sure of them. Meow. But good plan is to walk by looking the other way, and then turn around sharply. Another good plan, which David and I sometimes follow, is to stare them down. After a long time, they can't help winking, and then you know for certain that they are fairies. Now, there are also numbers of them along the baby walk, which is a famous gentle place, as spots frequented by fairies are called. Once 24 of them had an extraordinary adventure. They were a girls' school out for a walk with... Hold on. Kind of difficult to read this a little bit. It's like a poem, in a way. Wow. They were a girls' school out for a walk with the governess, and all wearing hyacinth gowns, when she suddenly put her finger in her mouth, and they all stood still on an empty bed and pretended to be hyacinths. Unfortunately, what the governess had heard was 2 gardeners coming to plant new flowers in that very bed. They were wheeling hand cart with the flowers in it, and were quite surprised to find the bed occupied. Pity to lift them as hyacinths, said the one man. Duke's orders, replied the other. And having emptied their cart, they dug up the boarding school and put the poor terrified things in it in 5 rows. Of course, neither the governess nor the girls dare let out that they were fairies. Wow. So they were carted far away to a potting shed, out of which they escaped in the night with their shoes. Wow. But there was a great row about it among the parents, and the school was ruined. Interesting. Wow. Okay, I guess that's a very little man. He's quite small. Excuse me. Wow. As for the houses, it is no use looking for them, because they are the exact opposite of our houses. You can see our houses by the day, but you can't see them by dark. Well, you can see the houses by dark, but you can't see them by day, for they are the colour of night. I never heard of anyone yet who could see night in the daytime. This does not mean that they are black, for night has its colours just as day has, but ever so much brighter. Wow. They're blues and reds and greens and likes ours with light behind them. The palace is entirely built of many-coloured glasses. Wow. And it's quite the loveliest of all royal residents. But the Queen sometimes complains because the common people will peep in to see what she's doing. Wow. They're very inquisitive. I don't know if that's right. Folk, and press quite hard against the glass. Wow. And that is why their noses are mostly snubby. My nose is snubby, kind of. The streets are miles long and very twisty, have paths on each side made of bright worsted. The birds used to steal the worsted for their nests, but a policeman has been appointed to hold on at the other end. I guess that's the policeman right there. A gnome. I don't know if I would take him seriously. I mean, the hat is very pointy. I'd play with that. One of the great differences between fairies and us is that they never do anything useful. When the first baby laughed for the first time, his laugh broke into a million pieces and they all went skipping about. That was the beginning of the fairies. They looked tremendously busy, as if they had not a moment to spare, but if you were to ask them what they're doing, they could not tell you in the least. They are frightfully ignorant, and everything to do is make-believe. They have a postman, but he never calls except Christmas with his little box. And though they have beautiful schools, nothing is taught in them. The youngest child, being a chief person, is always elected mistress, and when she is called to the role, they all go out for a walk and never come back. It's a very noticeable thing that in fairy families, the youngest is always chief person, and usually becomes prince or princess, and children remember this. I think it must be so among also humans. Humans also. That is why they are often made uneasy when they come upon the mother furtively putting new frills on the bassinet. Meow. Oh, that was a while. I need to meow. I'm trying to be more human-like, but it's difficult. Meow. You have probably observed that your baby sister wants to do all the sorts of things that your mother and her nurse wanted her not to do. Meow. So stand up in sitting down time and sit down in stand-up time, for instance, or to wake up when she should fall asleep or crawl on the floor when she is wearing her best frock. Meow. And so on. And perhaps you put this down to naughtiness, but it's not. It simply means that she is doing as she has seen of the fairies do. Meow. She begins by following their ways, and it takes about 2 years to get her into the human ways. Her fits of passion, meow, which are awful to behold and are usually called teething, or no such thing, meow. They are her natural exasperation, because we don't understand her, though she is talking intelligible languages. She is talking fairy. The reason mothers and nurses know what her remarks mean before other people know, as that Gutch means give it to me at once, while where is why do you wear such a funny hat? It's because mixing so much with babies, they have picked up a little of the fairy language. Wow. Of late, David has been thinking about hard. Hold on, this is slightly difficult. Oops. Of late, David has been thinking back hard about the fairy tongue, which his hands clutching his temples, and he has remembered a number of the phrases, which I shall tell you someday, if I don't forget. He had learned them in the days when he was a thrush, and though I suggest to him that perhaps it is really but bird language he is remembering. Meow meow. He says not, for these phrases are about fun and adventures, and the birds talked of nothing but nest building. He distinctly remembers that the birds used to go from spot to spot like ladies at a shop window, looking at different nests and saying, "Not my colour, my dear." Meow. "And how would that do with a soft lining?" Meow. "And but will it wear? And what hideous trimmings?" And so on. Meow. It's very pretty. Now, imagine if I was in the scene, I'd be a cat over there, and then I'd be prowling, and I'd be jumping and stuff, but I wouldn't eat them. I wouldn't do that. The fairies are exquisite dancers, and that is why one of the first things the baby does is to sign to you to dance to him, and then cry when you do not. When you do it. Sorry. They hold their great balls in the open air, in what is called fairy ring. For weeks afterwards you can see the rings on the grass. It is not there when they begin, but they make it by waltzing round and round. Now, sometimes you will find mushrooms inside the ring. These are fairy chairs that the servants have forgotten to clear away. Now, the chairs and the rings are the only telltale marks these little people leave behind them. They would remove even these were they not so fond of dancing. They tow it till the very moment of opening the gates. David and I once found the fairy ring quite warm, but there's also a way of finding out about the ball before it takes place. Now, you know the boards which tell at what time the gardens are too close today? Well, these tricky fairies sometimes slightly change the board on a ball night, so that says the gardens are too close at 6:30, for instance, instead of 7. This enables them to get begun half an hour earlier. There we go. That I like this. No, less reading. Look at that. More pictures. It looks like something you'd be colouring in, kind of. I mean, I would do it, but I can't because this book is from the library. Alex and Goodman went to the library and got these books. I was asleep here. I'm usually always sleeping. Wow. Wow. If on such a night we could remain behind in the gardens as the famous Mamie Mannering did, you might see delicious sights, hundreds of lovely fairies hastening to the ball, the married ones wearing their wedding rings round their waists, the gentlemen all in uniform holding up the ladies, trains and linkmen running front carrying winter cherries, which are the fairy lanterns, the cloakroom where they put on their silver slippers, get a ticket for their wraps, the flowers stemming from the baby walk to look on, and always welcome because they can lend a pin, the super's table with Queen Mab at the head of it. Goodness gracious, this is a kind of tongue twister kind of book. There's a lot of words. It almost doesn't make sense sometimes. You might be wondering that yourself now. But, it's kind of like a fancy book, one of the poem kind of books, Anyways, it's not bad. It is on. I don't know where I was at. Now. My arms are getting kind of stiff. Alright, and always welcome because they can lend a pin, the super table with Queen Mab at the head of it, and behind the chair, Lord Chamberlain, who carries a dandelion on which he blows when Her Majesty wants to know the time. The tablecloth varies according to seasons, and in May it is made of chestnut blossom. The way the fairy servants do this, the men scores of them, climb up the trees and shake the branches. Meow. The blossom falls like snow. Then the lady servants sweep it together by whisking the skirts until it's exactly like a tablecloth, and that's how they get their tablecloth. Interesting. Meow. Ooh, that feels good. Alright, I can just get to it. Oh goodness gracious, look at that guy. That's kind of a bit creepy. That's kind of scary. I mean, look at that guy out there. He's kind of scary too. Oh, well, anyways, wow. There is bread and butter to begin with, of the size of 3-penny bit, and cakes to end with. They are so small that they have no crumbs. The fairies sit round on mushrooms, and the first they are well behaved and always cough off the table, and so on. But after a bit they are not so well behaved, and they stick their fingers into the butter, which is got from the roots of the old trees, and really horrid ones crawl over the tablecloth, chasing sugar or other delicacies with their tongues. That is kind of gross. Honestly, I mean, it's okay. Anyways, now, when the queen sees them doing this, she signs to the servants to wash up and put away. Then everybody adjourns to the dance, and Queen walking in front, while the Lord Chamberlain walks behind her, carrying 2 little pots, one of which contains the juice of wallflower, the other juice of Solomon's seals. Wallflower juice is good for reviving dancers who fall to the ground in a fit, and Solomon's seal juice is for bruises. They bruise very easily, and when Peter plays faster and faster, they foot it until they fall down on its fits. For, as you know, without my telling you, Peter Pan is the fairies' orchestra. He sits in the middle of the ring, and they never dream of having, having a smart dance nowadays without him. Is written PP, I guess, is written on the corner of the invitation cards sent out by all the really good families. Oh, I see it there, PP. Interesting. Meow. Ooh, look at the frogs. Okay. Oh, I see. This whole book has different stories in it. Now this is Thumbelina. Oh, I see. Okay, the frogs. Oh, hold on. I'll be right back. I have to use the restroom. I'll be back. Right, I'm back. So, anyways, Thumbelina. There might be some sounds in the living room you might hear, so yeah, anyways. There was once a woman who wanted to have quite a tiny little child, but she did not know where to get one from. So one day, she went to an old witch and said to her, "I should so like to have a tiny little child. Can you tell me where I can get one?" "Oh, we have just got one ready," said the witch. "Here is barley corn for you, but it's not the kind of farmer sows in his fields, or feeds the cocks and hens with, I can tell you, but in the flower pot. Then you will see something happen." "Oh, thank you," said the woman, and gave the witch a shilling, for that was what it cost. Then she went home and planted the barley corn. Immediately there grew out a large beautiful flower, which looked like tulip, but the... Oh my goodness. Where's the pictures at? I mean, this is okay, but I want to see some pictures. Anyways, yeah. Petals were tightly closed as if they were still only a bud. "What a beautiful flower," explained the woman. She kissed the red and yellow petals, but as she kissed them, the flower burst open. It was a real tulip, such as one you can see any day, but in the middle of the blossom, on the green velvety petals, sat a little girl, quite tiny, trim, and pretty. She was scarcely half thumb in height, so they called her Thumbelina. An elegant polished walnut shell served Thumbelina as a cradle. The blue petals of violet were her mattress, and a rose leaf her coverlet. There she lay at night, but in the daytime she used to play about on the table. Here the woman had put a bowl surrounded by ring flowers, with their stalks in water, in the middle of which floated a great tulip petal, and on this Thumbelina sat, and sailed from one side of the bowl to the other, rowing herself with 2 white horsehairs for oars. It was such a pretty sight. She could sing too. Meow, 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 meow. Sorry. The voice more soft and sweet than had ever been heard before. One night when she was laying in her pretty little bed, an old toad crept in through a broken pane in the window. Meow. She was very ugly, clumsy, and clammy. She hopped on the table where Thumbelina lay asleep under the red rose leaf. Meow. This would make a beautiful wife for my son, said the toad, taking up the walnut shell with Thumbelina inside, and hopping with it through the window into the garden. There flowed a great wide stream, with slippery and marshy banks. Here the toad lived with her son. Meow. How ugly and clammy he was, just like his mother. Oh my goodness. Wow, the shade that he was thrown at, oh my goodness. I kind of forgot where it was. Meow. Croak, croak, croak was all he could say when he saw the pretty little girl in the walnut shell. Don't talk so loud, you'll wake her, said the old toad. She might escape us even now. She is as light as a feather. We will put her at once on a broad water lily leaf in the stream. That will be quite an island for her. She is so small and light, so you can't run from us there. Meow. Whilst we are preparing for the gust chamber under the marsh where she shall live. Outside in the brook grew many water lilies with broad green leaves, which looked as if they were swimming about on the water. The leaf farthest away was the largest. Meow. And to this the old toad swam with Thumbelina in her walnut shell. The tiny Thumbelina woke up very early in the morning, and when she saw where she was, she began to cry bitterly, for on every side of the great green leaf was water, and it could not get to the land. Meow. The old toad was down under the marsh, decorating her room with rushes and yellow marigold leaves, to make it very grand for her new daughter-in-law. Then she swam out with her ugly son to the leaf where Thumbelina lay. That's kind of funny. She wanted to fetch the pretty cradle to put into her room before Thumbelina herself came there. The old toad bowed low in the water before her, and said, Here, my son, you shall marry him, and live in great magnificent down under the marsh. Croak, 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 meow, was all the son could say. Then they took the neat little cradle and swam away with it. But Thumbelina sat alone on the great leaf and wept, for she did not want to live the clammy toad or marry her ugly son. The little fishes swimming under the water had seen the toad quite plainly and heard what she had said. So they put up their heads to see the little girl, and when they saw her, they thought her so pretty that they were very sorry that she would go down with the ugly toad to live. No, that must not happen. They assembled in the water round the green stalk which supported the leaf on which she was sitting, and nibbled the stem in two. Meow. Away floated the leaf down the stream. Well, Thumbelina definitely has some protectors on her side. That's very good. I would do the same. And Oh, hold on. I'll be right back. Wow. Right. Where was I? Away floated a leaf down the stream, bearing Thumbelina far beyond the reach of the toad. On she sailed past several towns, and little birds sitting in the bushes and sang, "What a pretty little girl!" The leaf floated further and farther away. Thus Thumbelina left her native land. Wow. A beautiful little white butterfly fluttered above her, and last settled on a leaf. Thumbelina pleased him, and she too was delighted, for now the toads could not reach her, and it was so beautiful where she was travelling. The sun. Ooh, this is nice. Ooh, how beautiful. Ooh, the fish are nice. Reminding me of tuna. I'm kind of hungry right now. But I can wait. After this, I'm going to go on the couch and, go to sleep. Possibly. Anyways. Shone on the water, and it made a sparkle like the brightest silver. She took off her sash and tried one end round the butterfly. The other end she fastened to the leaf, and so that now it glided along faster than ever. Wow. A great cockchafer came flying past. He caught sight of Thumbelina in a moment, had put his arms round her slender waist, and had flown off with her to the tree. The green leaf floated away down the stream, and the butterfly with it, for he was fastened to the leaf and could not get loose from it. Oh dear, how terrified poor little Thumbelina was when the cockchafer flew off with her to the tree. But she was especially distressed on the beautiful white butterfly's account, as she had tied him fast, so that if he could not get away, he must starve to death. Okay. Where was I? Wow. But the cockchafer did not trouble himself about that. He sat down with her on a large green leaf, gave her the honey out of the flowers to eat, and told her that she was very pretty, although she wasn't in the least like a cockchafer. Later on, all the other cockchafers lived in the same tree came to pay the calls. They examined Thumbelina closely and remarked, "Why, she has only 2 legs. How very miserable." "She has no feelers," cried another. I kind of want to know what a cockchafer is. I don't really know what it is. I don't know. Maybe a bug or something. "How ugly she is," said the little chaffers, and yet Thumbelina was really very pretty. The cockchafer who had stolen her knew this very well, but when he had heard of the lady saying she was ugly, he began to think so too, and would not keep her. She might go wherever she liked. So he flew down from the tree with her and put her on a daisy. There she sat and wept, because she was so ugly that the cockchafer would have nothing to do with her. Yet she was the most beautiful creature imaginable, so soft and delicate, like the loveliest rose leaf. Meow. The whole summer, poor little Thumbelina lived alone in the great wood. She plaited a bed for herself of blades of grass, and hung it up under the clover leaf, so that she was protected from the rain. She gathered honey from the flowers for food, and drank dew on the leaves every morning. Thus the summer and often passed, but then came winter. The long cold winter. All the birds had sung so sweetly about her had flown away. The trees shed their leaves, the flowers died. Meow. The great clover leaf under which she had lived curled up, and nothing remained of but the withered stalk. She was terribly cold, for her clothes were ragged, and she herself was so small and thin. Poor little Thumbelina. She would surely be frozen to death. It began to snow, and every snowflake that fell on her was to her a whole shovel full of Meow. Shovel full thrown on one of us. For we are so big, and she was only an inch high. She wrapped herself round in a dead leaf, but it was torn in the middle and gave her no warmth. She was trembling with cold. Just outside the wood where she was now living lay a great cornfield, but the corn had been gone a long time. Only the dry, bare stubble was left standing in the frozen ground. This made forest for her to wander about in. All at once she came across the door of a field mouse, who had a little house in an old tree. There the mouse lived, warm and snug, with storeroom full of corn, splendid kitchen and dining room. Poor little Thumbelina went up to the door and begged for a little piece of barley, for she had nothing. She had anything to eat for the last 2 days. Poor little creature, said the field mouse, for she was a kind-hearted old thing at the bottom. Come into my warm room and have some dinner with me. As Thumbelina pleased her, she said, as far as I am concerned, you may spend the winter with me, but you must keep my room clean and tidy, and tell me stories, for I like that very much. And Thumbelina did all that kind old field mouse asked. Meow. And did it remarkably well too. Now I'm expecting a visitor, said the field mouse. My neighbour comes to call me once a week. He is in better circumstance. Hold on. Meow. Has great big rooms and wears a fine black velvet coat. If you could only marry him. What is all this talk with marrying? Thumbelina is like tiny. I mean, she's not very old either. This should not happen. No. You would be well provided for, but he is blind. You must tell him all the prettiest stories you know. But Thumbelina did not trouble her head about him, for he was only a mole. He came and paid them a visit in his black velvet coat. He is so rich and so accomplished. The field mouse told her, his house is 20 times larger than mine. He possesses great knowledge, but he cannot bear the sun and the beautiful flowers. Speaks lightly of them, for he has never seen them. Oh, that's right, he's blind. He's a mole. Yeah. I've caught a few moles in my time. Meow. Ooh, there he is. Thumbelina had to sing to him, so she sang, Lady bird, fly away home, and other songs so prettily that the mole fell in love with her, but he did not say anything. He was very cautious man. Mole man. Well, a short time before, he had took a long passage through the ground from his own house, of that of his neighbour. In this he gave the field mouse and Thumbelina permission to walk so often as they liked, but he begged them not to be afraid of the dead bird that lay in the passage. It was a real bird, with a beak and feathers. Must have died a little time ago. Now lay buried just where he had just made his tunnel. The mole took a piece of rotten wood in his mouth, for that glows like fire in the dark, and went in front, lighting them through the long dark passage. When they came to the place where the dead bird lay, the mole put his broad nose against the ceiling and pushed a hole through it. Meow, so that the daylight could shine down. In the middle of the path lay a dead swallow, his pretty wings pressed close to his side. His claws had drawn on his feathers. The poor bird had evidently died of cold. Thumbelina was very sorry, for she was very fond of little birds. They had sung and twittered so beautifully to her all through the summer. The mole kicked him with his bendy legs and said, now, he can't sing any more. He must be very miserable to be a little bird. I am thankful none of my little children are birds, always starve in winter. Yes, you speak like a sensible man, said the field mouse. What has a bird in spite of all his singing the winter time? He must starve and freeze, and that must be very pleasant for him, I must say. I don't agree. Thumbelina did not say anything, but when the other two had passed on, she bent down to the bird, brushed aside the feathers from his head, and kissed his closed eyes gently. How sweet. Perhaps it was that saying to me so prettily in the summer, she thought. How much pleasure he did give me, dear little bird. Oh, that was nice. He made a bed for him. The mole closed up the hole again which let in the light, and then escorted the ladies home. But Thumbelina could not sleep that night. So she got out of her bed and plaited a great big blanket of straw and carried it off, and spread it over the dead bird. Piled upon it thistledown as soft as cotton wool, which she had found in the field mouse's room. Wow. So that poor little thing should lie warmly buried. Farewell, pretty little bird, she said. Farewell, and thank you for your beautiful songs in the summer. When the trees were green, the sun shone down warmly on us. Then she laid her head against the bird's heart. Wow. But the bird was not dead. He had been frozen, but now that she had warmed him, he was coming to life. Wow. In autumn the swallows fly away for foreign lands, but there are some who are late in starting, and they get so cold that they drop down, as if they're dead, and snow comes to cover them. Thumbelina trembled. She was frightened, for the bird was very large in comparison with herself, only an inch high, but she took courage, piled up down more closely over the poor swallow, fetched her own coverlet and laid over his head. Next night she crept out again to him. There he was alive, but very weak, could only open his eyes for a moment and look at Thumbelina, who was standing in front of him with a piece of rotten wood in her hand, for she had no other lantern. Thank you, pretty little child, said the swallow to her. I am so beautifully warm. Soon I shall regain my strength, and then I shall be able to fly over again into the warm sunshine. Oh, she said, it is very cold outside. It is snowing and freezing. Stay in your warm bed. I'll take care of you. Very nice. Then she brought him water in a kettle, which he drank, after which he related to her how he had torn one of his wings on a bramble, so that he could not fly as fast as other swallows, who had flown far away in warmer lands. So at last he had dropped down exhausted, and then he could remember no more. The whole winter he remained down there, and Thumbelina looked after him and nursed him tenderly. Neither the mole nor the field mouse learnt anything of this, for they could not bear the poor swallow. When spring came, the sun warmed the earth again. The swallow said farewell to Thumbelina, who opened the hole in the roof for him, which the mole had made. The sun shone brightly down upon her. The swallow asked her if she could go with him. She could sit upon his back. Thumbelina wanted very much to fly away into the green wood, but she knew that the old field mouse would be sad if she ran away. No, I mustn't come, she said. Farewell, dear good little girl, said the swallow, and flew off into the sunshine. Thumbelina gazed after him with the tears standing in her eyes, for she was very fond of the swallow. Tweet, tweet, meow, meow, sang the bird, and flew into the green wood. Thumbelina was very unhappy. She was not allowed to go into the warm sunshine. The corn which had been sowed in the field of the field mouse home grew up high into the air, and made a thick forest for the poor little girl, who was only an inch high. Now you are to be the bride, Thumbelina, said the field mouse, for our neighbour was proposed for you. What a piece of fortune for a poor child like you. Now you must set to work with your linens for your dowry, for nothing must be lacking if you are to become the wife of our neighbour, the mole. Thumbelina had to spin all day long, and every evening the mole visited her, told her that when the summer was over, the sun would shine so hot now. It was burning the earth, hard as stone. Yes, when the summer had passed, they would keep the wedding. But she was not at all pleased about it now, for she did not like the stupid mole. Every morning when the sun was rising and every evening when it was setting, she would steal out of the house door, and when the breeze parted the ears of the corn so that she could see the blue sky through them, well, she thought how bright and beautiful it must be outside, longed to see her dear swallow again. But he never came. No doubt he had flown away far into the green wood. Oh, poor Thumbelina. Hold on. You could, yes. Alright. By autumn, Thumbelina had finished the dowry. In 4 weeks, you'll be married, said the field mouse. Don't be obstinate, or I shall bite you with my sharp white teeth. That's not very nice. You'll get a fine husband. The king himself has not such a velvet coat. His storeroom and cellar are full, and you should be thankful for that. Well, the wedding day arrived. The mole had come to fetch Thumbelina to live with him deep down underground, never to come into the warm sun again, for that was what he didn't like. Meow. Oh, sorry, I kind of jump a little bit when I'm meowing. Meow. The poor little girl was very sad, for now she must say goodbye to the beautiful sun. Farewell, bright sun, she cried, stretching out her arms towards it, and taking another step outside the house, for now the corn had been reaped, and only the dry stubble was left standing. Farewell, farewell, she said, and put her arms round a little red flower that grew there. Give my love to the dear swallow when you see him. Tweet, tweet, meow, meow, sounded in her ear all at once. She looked up. There was the swallow flying past. As he saw Thumbelina, he was very glad. She told him how unwilling she was to marry the ugly mole, as then she had to live underground where the sun never shone, and could not help bursting into tears. Meow. The cold winter is coming now, said the swallow. I must fly away to warmer lands. Will you come with me? You can sit on my back, and I will fly away, far away from the ugly mole and his dark house, over the mountains to the warm countries, where the sun shines more brightly than here, where it's always summer. There are always beautiful flowers. Do come with me, dear little Thumbelina. Meow. You saved my life when I lay frozen in the dark tunnel. Yes, I will go with you, said Thumbelina. I got on the swallow's back, sorry. Meow. With her feet on one side of his outstretched wings, up he flew into the air, over the woods and the seas, over the great mountains where the snow is always lying, and if she was cold, she crept under him, his warm feathers, only keeping her little head out. It would a very nice swallow, to admire all the beautiful things in the world beneath. Well, at least they came to warm lands. There the sun was brighter, the sky seemed twice as high, and the hedges hung finest green and purple grapes. In the woods grew oranges and lemons. The air was scented with myrtle and mint, and on the roads were pretty little children, running about and playing with great gorgeous butterflies. But the swallow flew on farther. It became more and more beautiful. Under the most splendid green trees, beside a blue lake, stood a glittering white marble castle. Meow. Vines hung about high pillars. There were so many swallow nests, and in one of these lived the swallow who was carrying Thumbelina. Here is my house, said he. Meow. But it won't do for you to live with me. I am not tidy enough to please you. Find a home for yourself in one of those lovely flowers that grow down there. Now I will set you down, and you can do whatever you like. Meow. That would be splendid, said she, clapping her little hands. There lay a great white marble column which had fallen to the ground, broken into 3 pieces. But between these grew the most beautiful white flowers. Now, the swallow flew down with Thumbelina and set her upon one of the broad leaves. But there, to her astonishment, she found a tiny little man sitting in the middle of the flower, as white and transparent as if he were made of glass. He had the prettiest golden crown on his head, and most beautiful wings on his shoulders. He himself was no bigger than Thumbelina. He was the spirit of the flower. In each blossom there dwelt a tiny man or woman, but this one was the king of others. "How handsome he is," whispered Thumbelina to the swallow. The little prince was very much frightened at the swallow. In comparison with one so tiny as himself, he seemed a giant. But when he saw Thumbelina, he was delighted, for she was the most beautiful girl he had ever seen. So he took his golden crown off his head and put it on hers, asking her name and if she would be his wife. That was really fast. I don't know what it is with these stories, but they get married quite fast. So hopefully it lasts, because never mind, I'll continue. Hold on. And then she would be queen of all flowers. Yes, he was a different kind of husband to the son of the toad, and the mole with the black velvet coat. So she said yes to the noble prince, and out of each flower came a lady and gentleman, each so tiny and pretty that it was pleasant to see them. Each brought Thumbelina a present, but the best of all was the beautiful pair of wings which were fastened onto her back, and now she too could fly. From flower to flower they all wished her joy, and the swallow sat above in his nest, sang the wedding march, and that he did as well as he could, but he was sad because he was very fond of Thumbelina. He did not want to be separated from her. "You shall not be called Thumbelina," said the spirit of the flower to her. "That is an ugly name." "I don't think it's ugly, and you are much too pretty for that. We will call you May Blossom." "I don't like May Blossom." Yeah, Thumbelina's better. It's easier to say. Thumbelina, May Blossom. No. "Farewell, farewell," said the little swallow with a heavy heart, and flew away, farther to fatherlands. Far, far away, right back to Denmark. Oh, there's a place. There he had a little nest above a window where his wife lived, who can tell fairy stories. "Tweet, tweet, meow, meow," he sang to her, and that is the way he learnt the whole story. And that is the way we learnt the whole story. Okay. I guess it's done. Oh, I guess it is. Oops. Goblin Market. Interesting. Alright, I'll be right back. I'm gonna go use the bathroom again. So, I'll see you. Now, I'm back. Alright, so we're gonna continue on. Goblin Market. Morning and evening, maids heard the goblin cry. "Come buy our orchids, fruits. Come buy apples and quinces, lemons and oranges, plump unpecked cherries, melons and raspberries, bloom-down-cheeked peaches, swart-headed mulberries, wild freeborn cranberries, crab-apples, dewberries, pineapples, blackberries, apricots, strawberries, all ripe together in summer weather, morns that pass, fair eves that flies. Come buy, our grapes fresh from the vine." Alright. Pomegranates full of fine, dates and sharp boluses. Alright, this is kind of difficult to read a little bit. Well, I'll manage. Rare pears and green gages, damsons and bilberries, taste them and try, currants and gooseberries, bright fire-like berries, figs to fill your mouth, citrons from the south, sweet tongue and sound eye, come buy. Oh, it's a poem. Evening by evening, Among the brookside rushes, Laura bowed her head to her. Lizzie veiled her blushes, crouching close together. In the cool weather, with clasping arms, cautioning lips, with tingling cheeks and fingertips. Lie close, Laura said, picking up her golden head. We must not look at goblin men. We must not buy their fruits. Who knows upon what soil they fed the hungry, thirsty roots? Come by, all the goblins, hobbling down the glen. Oh, cried Lizzie, Laura, you should not peep to goblin men. Lizzie covered up her eyes, covered close, lest they should look. Laura reared her glassy head, whispered like the restless brook. Look, Lizzie, down the glen tramp little men. One hauls a basket, one bears a plate, one hugs a gold dish of many pounds of weight. How fair the vine must grow, whose grapes are so luscious, who warm the wind must blow, though those fruit bushes. No, said Lizzie, no, their offers should not charm us, the evil gifts would harm us. She thrusts a dimple finger in each ear, shut eyes and ran. Curious Laura chose to linger, wondering each merchant man. One had a cat's face, one whisked a tail, one tramped a rat's pace, one crawled like a snail, one like a wombat, proud, obtuse, and furry, one like a rattle, trumble, hurry, scurry. She heard a voice like voice of doves, cooing all together. They sounded like full of loves in the pleasant of the weather. Laura stretched her gleaming neck like a rush-embedded swan, like a lily from the beck, like a moonlight-lit popular branch, like a vessel at the launch when its resistance is gone. Well, backwards up the mossy glen turn the troop, the goblin men, with the shrill reap the cry. Come by, come by. When they reached where Laura was, they stood stock still upon the moss, leering at each other. Brother with a queer brother, signalling each other. Brother with a sly brother. One set his basket down, one reared his plate, one began to weave a crown of tendrils, leaves, and rough nuts brown. Men sell not such in any town. One heaved the golden weight of dish and fruit to offer her. Come by, was still their cry. Laura stared but did not stir, logged but had no money, longed, meow. The whisk-tailed merchant bade her taste in tones as smooth as honey. The cat-faced purred, meow. The rat-paced spoke of word, of welcome and snail-paced even was heard. One parrot voiced and jolly, and carried pretty goblin still for pretty Polly. One whistled like a bird, but sweet-toothed Laura spoke in haste. Good folk, I have no coin to take where to purloin. I've no copper in my purse. Right, this is more like it. Alright. Interesting little gnomes on the ground. I'd like to see more of this, like pictures. The rhyming thing is kind of difficult to read, but I'm not going to complain too much. Now, I have no silver either, and all my gold is one of the furs. Sorry, I don't. These words are difficult. Now, that shakes in windy weather above the rusty heather. You have much gold upon your head. They answered all together. Buy from us with golden curl. She clipped a precious golden lock. She dropped a tear more rare than pearl, and sucked the fruit globes fair on red. Sweeter than honey from rock, stronger than man rejoicing wine, clearer than water flow the juice. She never tasted such before. I don't know if I'm reading this the right way. So I don't know. I'm just reading what I know. So. Sweeter than honey from the rock, stronger than man rejoicing wine, clearer than water flowed the juice she never tasted before. How should it cloy with length of use? She sucked and sucked and sucked more. Fruits with the unknown orchard bore. She sucked until her lips were sore, then flung the emptied rinds away, but gathered up on kennel stone, and knew not was it night or day, as she turned home alone. Meow. Lizzie met her at the gate, full of wise upbraidings. Dear, you should not stay late. Twilight is not good for maidens. Should not loiter in the glen, in the haunts of goblin men. Do not remember Jenny, how she met them in the moonlight, took the gifts with both choice and many, and the fruits and wore their flowers, plucked from bowers, where summer ripens at all hours, but ever in the moonlight. Wow. She pined and pined away, sought them by night and day, found no more, but dwindled and grew grey, then fell with the first snow, while on this day no grass will grow. Where she lies low, I planted daisies there a year ago. They never blow, you should not loiter so. Meow. Nay, hush, said Laura, nay, hush, my sister. I ate my refill, yet my mouth waters still. Tomorrow night I will buy more, and kiss her. Have done with sorrow, I'll bring you plums tomorrow, fresh on the mother twigs. Cherries. Sorry. I don't know. Something is barking. I don't know. Cherries worth getting. You cannot think what figs my teeth have met in. What melons icy cold, piled in dish of gold, too huge for me to hold. What peaches with velvet nap, pellucid grapes without one seed. Undorous, indeed, must be mead, wherein they grow, and pure they wave, they drink, with lilies at the brink, sugar sweet the sap. Golden head by golden head, like two pigeons in one nest, folding each other's wings, they lay down in their curtained bed, like two blossoms on one stem, like two flakes of new fallen snow, like two wands of ivory, tipped with gold for awful kings. Moon stars gazed in them, wind sang to them lullaby. Lumbering owls forbore to fly, naught but flapped to the fro round the rest. Cheek to cheek, breast to breast, locked together in one nest. Early in the morning, meow, meow, meow. When the first cock crowed his warning, neat like bees are sweet and busy, Laura rose at Lizzie. Fetched in honey, milk, and cows, aired set, so rise the house. Kneaded cakes of white as wheat, cake for dainty mouths to eat. Next churned butter, whipped up cream, fed the poultry sat and seed. Talked a modest maiden should, Lizzie with open heart. Okay. Alright. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Alex, do I have to read this? Yeah, you might as well finish it. Alright, I'm going to finish it. I'm sorry. This is I'm not good with poems and stuff. I mean, I guess, or maybe I'm reading it wrong, but hopefully it's still okay for you. And yeah, it's alright. Anyways, Laura in an absent dream, one content, one sickened part, one warbling for the mere bright day's daylight, one longing for the night. At length slow evening came, they went with pitchers to read the reedy brook. Lizzie most placid in her look, Laura most like leaping flame. They drew the gurgling water from its deep. Lizzie plucked purple and rich golden flags. Then turning homeward said, the sunset flushes those furthest loftiest crags. Come, Laura, not another maiden lags. No wilful squirrel wags, the beasts, the birds are fast asleep. But loyal Laura loitered still among the rushes, and said the bank was steep. And said the hours early still, the dew not fallen, the wind not chill, listening ever, but not catching the customary cry, come by, with its irritated jingle, sugar-baited words, Not for all who watching, one discerning, even one goblin, racing, whisking, tumbling, hopping, let alone the herds that used to tramp along the glen in grounds of single, of brisk fruit merchantmen. Till Lizzie urged, "O Laura, come, I hear the fruit call, but I dare not look. You should not loiter longer at this brook. Come with me home. The stars rise, the moon bends here. Her arc, each glowworm, winks her spark. Let us get home before night grows dark, for clouds may gather through this summer's weather, but our lights drench us thoroughly. Then we lost our way, what should we do?" Laura turned cold as stone to find a sister heard that cry alone. Wow, that goblin cry, come by, our fruits come by. Must she then be by no more? Such dainty fruits, must she not more the success past to find, gone deaf and blind? A trees of droop from the root. Alright. This might sound pretty, I think we're going to change something a bit. I think we're going to read this as how I would read it. Alright, oh, sorry about that. Meow. It is a difficult read. Once upon a time, okay. Yeah, I think it's getting easier, hold on. Once upon a time there was a little dwarf named Albert. Interesting name. He lived in a castle next to a big mushroom. The mushroom was huge, and it was like full of like, it was squishy and stuff, like it was squishy mushroom, and the mushroom was it was really big, and he lived next to it. But Galbert, I forgot his name already. He was very tiny. He was really small, but he was really brave. Anyways, next page. Gilbert, he lived next to a big mushroom, and he was really beautiful there. It was really nice and stuff like that. There was a nice glen next to it, like a big stream and stuff. And then, he was whisking away in one of these in the stream. He was swimming one day, and then he fell in, and then this big frog came and ate him. But then the frog got his tummy ache and spit him out and stuff. And this is kind of what the glen, see the water right there, and you see right, he's over there, but then there's all these people right here. So it's interesting. Hopefully there's a fruits that they're putting on her. I don't know. Anyways. So Geralt, he got swallowed by the toad, but the toad basically pooped him out, and then he's floating like a log down the glen and stuff, and then he eventually gets to the very end, and he gets up and he does a little strut and goes right back to his castle. Right next to the mushroom. Gets back home, and and then there's this person right here. This is not him, but it looks like they're looking at a big burnt burrito. Something. There's vines on it or something. I don't know what they're doing, but yeah. Anyways, this Goblin Market, I guess. Yeah, there is a Goblin Market in this, and so anyways, but so he goes back home, and then he's hungry, and then he whips up a sandwich, and he's eating it, and stuff. It's really good. And right there. See right there? That's the big market and stuff. That's that he went and got some tomatoes and some cucumber and made some sandwich. He got some boiled eggs and stuff like that. It was really good. What he does is he gets the caviar from the you go to the store and they have these tubes of caviar. It's pink, and you put it on some knacker butter, And then you get some boiled eggs and cut them up and stick it on there. And then you put some agurk, which is cucumber in Norwegian. Agurk. And then, oh, it's so good, it's so tasty. Anyways. Alright. Hey, the next story. Here we go. I hope this one's not a poem. I don't think it is. But, yeah, the flower babies. Interesting. Anyways, I'll be right back. I have to use the restroom again. So, alright. Meow. I'm back. Alright, flower babies. Once upon a time, when fairies danced in the moonlight and the fairy elves played merry pranks, there used also to be flower babies. They were fat, chubby mites, and flowers loved them dearly. But the naughty elves thought it great fun to tease them. Flower babies, you see, were tiny, quiet babies. They only knew how to love and smile, to laugh and to play. They weren't what elves called useful in the world. They were only just babies. Well, elves, you see, were older and could be useful sometimes, when they were good, and very mischievous, sometimes when they were naughty. Now the flower baby I'm going to tell you about was a daisy flower baby. He lived amongst the daisies. They'd given him dear little white wings with a tiny tip of pink underneath to make them pretty. He used a flit about the or he used to flight about the fields, I guess. In the daytime, and his greatest fun was to sit swinging on a daisy. He wasn't very heavy, so when the wind was blowing softly over the grass and on the flowers, or bowing and curtsying in the breeze, the daisies used to let him nestle down amidst the white petals. He wasn't the only flower baby. There were many of them, but he was the venturous sprite. Most of the others could only just flutter from daisy to daisy, and sit swinging, sucking the thumbs, and gurgling at the fun of the world. But Goldie, as he was called, only sucked his thumb sometimes. When he was very puzzled and grave, he was grown too big to suck his thumb, as he could fly now without fluttering, and his wings could practically pay visits to his friends, the daisies, far away across fields. They called him Goldie because his hair was yellow like gold and curled in a big curl on top of his head. One day, when he was sitting lazily, swinging with his pretty wings spread out, ready to save him from fall, gazing about him to see whom he could find to play with, he heard a curious noise, a puffing kind of noise. Puzzled him until he spied two mischievous elves. They were tiny red caps, funny yellow spotted doublets and red hose, and yellow shoes. They had been so quiet, so very quiet, he might have guessed it, if he had known more about them, the abrupt mischief. Now, they had crept up the daisy and were blowing and puffing out the cheeks and scattering all the pretty white petals. They called it snipping off a kirtle. The poor daisy could not do nothing. They held it fast, and was so much stronger than she was. Soon she was left alone crying over her lost kirtle, while the naughty elves ran away laughing. Goldie was so distressed. He came down and kissed her, and tried to comfort her. He told her not to cry, but the poor little thing could not help crying, for she knew her pretty myrtle couldn't be made quickly, and this made her sad. Goldilocks thought he would go and see if he could find someone to help her. She flew away of the tall grasses. There he stopped, so astonished he quite forgot poor Daisy. Where could this great shining thing be in his way? It was spinning round and round, buzzing and fussing and stretching out such queer, ugly bits of stalks. Though Goldilocks, he stood with his hands on his little fat knees, gazing at the wonderful monster. Flower baby, don't stand gaping there. You little silly, help me get up my back. Give me a stout blade of grass to catch hold of. So Goldilocks flew up and sat upon a grass stalk and bent it down. The ugly big things which were the beetle's feet and hands, caught hold of the grass, and Goldilocks lighted on the ground. The big buzzing grumbling of the old beetle pulled himself off his back and then fell on his feet, for he was way too heavy for the grass to hold him when once Goldilocks had let go. "Thank you, Flower Baby," buzzed Mr. Beetle as he slowly crawled away. "I don't know your name, but next time you want any help, come to me." It was getting warm, the sun was hot, and Goldilocks had wandered far, so seeing 3 kind Mother Daisies nodding to him, he flew to them sitting. Alright. Down in their shade he fell fast asleep, with his dear little head on a daisy bud of pillows. Now the naughty elves, after having blown the rags of the daisies, pretty Kirtle had climbed into May Tree. Sitting on the branches among the May blossoms, they began to think of what mischief they could do. They sat dangling their legs, swinging their toes sometime. Puck was one who was always up to the most mischief, and at last he said to Robin, "I know what we will do. It will be rare fun. We will go and steal Flower Baby's wings." "Oh ho!" chuckled Robin. "What fun! They can't fly if we steal their wings. But little nannies are so hard to find." "Meow." "I know where to look for them," said Puck. "It's just the time of the day. It's all cool and breezy up here amongst the May blossoms. But down there in the fields it's very stuffy, and we're sure to find one asleep." "Now no noise, Robin. Don't let me hear you chuckle. Follow me, but no noise." Meow. He held up a warning finger. Now Robin always would chuckle and laugh just when he ought to be quiet. Quiet. It was most provoking of him, but this time he only smiled all over his face and nodded at Puck. Off they slipped down the May Tree, and tiptoed they began to peer about the field amongst the daisies. It was very hot, and all the world was asleep. There was no one to tell Goldilocks of his danger. He was dreaming, he was swinging, and that he had nearly fallen off a very tall daisy when he woke with a start. What is that had tugged him and hurt him? He rubbed his sleepy eyes and stood up. His dear pillow, the daisy bud, was bending sorrowfully towards him. She whispered to him, "Goldilocks, the naughty elves have stolen your wings." Meow. Goldilocks tried to rise into the air. He couldn't believe Daisy Bud. He would fly away, but up to Mother Daisy and swing his arms. But no, he couldn't rise into the air. He was a poor, maimed Flower Baby. He could only stand on his small feet and sob bitterly. "My wings, my dear white wings, they have stolen my wings." He sobbed and sobbed as if his little heart would break. Far away, running as fast as their naughty legs could carry them, Puck and Robin, each carrying a wing, chuckling with delight. They didn't want the wings on one bit. They never flew themselves, but it was great fun stealing them away from a stupid Flower Baby. Meow. Such a cry-baby, too, as it was. "Cry, baby, they sang mockingly, never thinking how cruel and unkind they were. Yeah, very cruel. But someone heard poor Goldilocks' sobs and came scurrying up. Don't cry, Flower Baby. Why, what's the matter?" "They've stolen your wings, have they? Poor little one. Why are you nearly as badly off as I was when those same tiresome elves turned me on my back, left me spinning myself round like a top? But for you, Flower Baby, I might have been still sprawling on my back." "Don't cry any more, but do as I tell you, and I promise to help you," said Mr. Beetle. "You must come with me to my friend Mermaid, who lives in the silent pool, but it is a long, rough road. You can't go there. Now that you have lost your wings without a little coat, we have to wander through the forest. Now, climb mountains, pass through valleys and briars. Thorns will hurt you." Poor Goldilocks, how was he to get a little coat? He had never seen a Flower Baby with such a thing. He looked around with the tears still in his big blue eyes, when a soft voice called to him, "Climb up to me, Goldilocks, don't be afraid. Now that you cannot fly, you must climb, and you must tear off as many strips of my white kirtle as you want. They will show you are my Flower Baby, and nothing will harm you in the forest and the valleys if you wear my livery." So Goldilocks climbed bravely up the daisy stalk, and was so much harder than flying, but at last he got up. Now, the kind daisy let him take 6 big white petals, strips from her white kirtle, and then he slipped quietly down, far quicker than he got up. Then, sitting at her feet amongst the clover, he made himself a funny little coat. Mr. Beetle, who was very clever with his hands and feet, tied the coat round Goldilocks with a dainty silken cord made of cobwebs borrowed from Dame Spider. Now, they were soon ready for their journey and started off. Mr. Beetle in front, Goldilocks trotting behind. It was a long journey, and Flower Baby grew tired and often very frightened, though Mr. Beetle was most kind. The grass was rough to his little feet. The forest of wheat ears they wandered through was very dark, and such strange creatures came around him. When they left the forest wheat ears, they came to another dark, terrible land, full of brambles, which tore his pretty white coat, and giant stinging nettles which hurt shockingly. They climbed up big mountains and down deep valleys, till at last they came to a beautiful pool, shaded by all trees. Here Mr. Beetle stopped and gave peculiar drumming call. Poor Goldilocks was so tired and so terrified he sat down and wept bitterly. Then, oh, wonder of wonders, 2 soft arms gathered him up. A beautiful mermaid with long dark hair, lovely eyes, the colour of blue water, bent face over and kissed him. "Now, tell me all about it, you dear Flower Baby. Don't cry. Tell me all about it, darling." Then, between his sobs, leaning his head on her shoulder, Goldilocks told her all about his lost wings, how he never could fly any more, and how tired made him coming through those terrible dark forests, and how great big creatures with hair on them nipped his legs. Shiny round creatures buzzed at him, yellow-legged brown creatures hummed at him, nasty thin-winged monsters stung him. The mermaid kissed and comforted him. She smiled a little to herself, for she knew the dreadful creature that had so frightened poor Flower Baby was only a tiny field mouse, who took his bare toes for, okay, oh, I see. Yeah, this is nice. Ooh, what a nice, oh, sorry, I was getting a cramp. Something nice to eat. The tiny creature that buzzed was only one of her friends. Our father Beetle, going home to his family, Dame Yellowlegs was but a busy bee, very busy indeed, gathering honey, and the winged thin monster was only a gnat who thought of Goldilocks was such a nice soft thing to pinch. One can't help pinching, stinging, if one is a gnat. Poor Goldilocks, it was all very dreadful, he said, but now he felt safe and happy with his kind arms around him. After he was quite rested and had a delightful little bath in the pool, he had floated on a big leaf with a new friend, the mermaid, swimming beside him. Goldilocks began to feel that even with his wings, he was almost happy without his wings for swimming, even though he had a lovely fish's tail, all colours of the rainbow, like one mermaid stared herself by. Wasn't quite as nice as flying through the air on her own white wings. Perhaps his kind friend guessed what Goldilocks was feeling, for after she had shown him the fish swimming about the water, the stately swans, with their dear small family gliding through the reeds, and the silly little ducky dillies with their heads in their lilies and their little toes up in the air, and had made him laugh merrily at them, and had shown him the big bullfrog croaking under the bank with his rough, round, staring eyes and solemn face, and the wicked-looking water snake slipping away to hide under a root. She said to him, "Flower Baby, I have shown you many strange things, but my cold, silent pool is no home for a Flower Baby. So now I will send you to the Flower Fairy, and you must tell her about your lost wings. And if you say Mermaid has sent you, she will listen." Goldilocks' eyes grew up very big and frightened. No, no, don't send me, though. The dreadful, dreadful forest, please. Dear mermaid, I can't fly. Let me stay here and sail on a big leaf. My feet are so tired, so tired. But won't you like to go floating away? Flower baby, won't that be as good as flying? I don't know what floating means, said Goldilocks, gravely shaking his curly head. I know what flying means. I can fly, but I can't fly. I can't float. Meow. Ooh, hold on. You good? Yes. Alright. She laughed, and then, sinking under water, she blew and blew till suddenly there rose from the pool the loveliest round bubble anyone ever saw. The sunlight gleamed upon it. It looked like a great ball of opal, all colours of the rainbow. Oop. Excuse you, Alex. Yes, excuse me. Goldilocks fairly danced with joy at the sight of it. The beautifulest thing it had ever seen. He said. His friend smiled and said, Now, flower baby, climb up on my shoulder and sit down on this beautiful thing. Goldilocks, trembling with delight, clambered up on her shoulder and forgetting even to kiss his goodbye, sat on the beautifulest thing and began to sail away over the stream and over the fields far away. He blew kisses as fast as he could. Then he shouted for joy at the feeling himself sailing away through the air. How long or how far he sailed he never could say, but at last he floated on to a rose bush. His fairy balloon melted away. He found himself kneading on a rose, while looking down at him was a lovely fairy. Her golden hair hung down to her waist. Her silver robe was embroidered with rose leaves, but oh, joy of joys, in Goldilocks' eyes she had the wings, real beautiful wings, blue and silver wings. He wasn't afraid of her. She would know what losing one's wings meant. She would understand how bad it was tottering about on the ground on bare feet, which one had known what was to fly. She would know how delightful it was to fly through the air in one's own very own wings, not floating on around. Slippery air bubble. Swimming was all very well for fishes and frogs, and some birds and mermaids, but the only thing for a flower baby was wings. So kneeling to the fairy, he told her all his long, long little story, just as I have tried to tell it. When he came to the end, he said, Flower babies can't do without wings. She smiled at him and said, Quite true, little one. Come and stand here beside me. And then she stopped, stooped towards him, and fastened onto his shoulders 2 lovely wings, more beautiful than the white ones he had before, for these were all shot with many colours, like the balloon on which he had floated to her feet. When he had kissed her hand in thanks, he flew right away to his dear Daisy mother to tell her he was safe. Now, Puck and Robin, very much ashamed of themselves when the fairy sent for them and made them give up to her the stolen white wings. To punish them for being cruel and unkind, she made them each wear for several days a pair of cockchafer's wings. I wouldn't allow them to use their legs, as they were very nimble on their feet, extremely awkward with their wings. Even bird, bat, insect mocked them and laughed at them. They soon found that the being teased was not quite as amusing after all. When the fairy let them put off their wings and use their legs again, they didn't go about any longer worrying flower babies or making themselves disagreeable as before. Now, fairier than a fairy. Interesting. There's quite a bit more. Maybe. Ooh. All right. Let's start. Once there lived a king who had no children for many years after his marriage. At length heaven granted him daughters of such remarkable beauty that he could think of no name so appropriate for her as fairer than a fairy. It never occurred to the good-natured monarch that such a name was certain to call down the hatred and jealousy of the fairies in a body on the child. But this is what happened. No sooner had they heard of the presumptuous name than they resolved to gain possession of her who bore it, and either to torture or torment her cruelly, or at least to conceal her from the eyes of all men. The eldest of the tribe was entrusted to carry out the revenge. This fairy was named Lagri. She was so old that she only had one eye and one tooth left. Oh my goodness. Wow. And even those poor remains she had to keep all night in a strengthening liquid. She was also a spiteful. She gladly devoted all her time to carrying out all the mean or ill-natured tricks of the whole body of fairies. With a large experience added to her native spite, she found little difficulty in carrying off Fairer than a Fairy. The poor child, who was only 7 years old, nearly died of fear in finding herself the power of this hideous creature. However, when after hours of journey underground, she found herself in a splendid palace with lovely gardens, she felt a little reassured, was further cheered when she discovered that her pet cat and dog had followed her. The old fairy led her to a pretty room which said should be hers, at the same time giving her the strictest orders never to let out the fire which was burning brightly in the grate. She then gave 2 glass bottles in the princess's charge, desiring her to take the greatest care of them, and having enforced her orders with most awful threats in case of disobedience, she vanished, leaving the little girl at liberty to explore the palace and grounds, and a good deal relieved at having only 2 apparently easy tasks set to her. Several years passed, during which time the princess grew accustomed to her lonely life, obeyed the fairy's orders, and the degrees forgot all about the court and king of her father. One day, while passing near a fountain in the garden, she noticed that the sun's rays fell in water in such a manner as to produce a brilliant rainbow. She stood still to admire it, when, to her great surprise, she had heard a voice addressing her which seemed to come from the center of its rays. The voice was that of a young man. The sweetness of the tone and the agreeable things it uttered led one to infer that its owner must be equally charming. But this had to be a mere matter of fancy, for no one was visible. The beautiful rainbow informed Fairer than a Fairy that he was young, the son of a powerful king, and that the fairy Lagri, who owned his parents, a grudge had revenged herself by depriving him of his natural shape for some years, that she had imprisoned him in the palace, where he had found his confinement hard to bear for some time. But now he no longer sighed for freedom, since he had seen and learned to love Fairer than a Fairy. He added many other tender speeches to this declaration, and the princess, of whom such remarks were new experience, could not help feeling pleased and touched by his attentions. The prince could only appear or speak under the form of a rainbow, and it was therefore necessary that the sun should shine on water so as to enable the rays to form themselves. Alright, interesting. Fairer than a Fairy lost no moment in which she could meet her lover, and they enjoyed many long, interesting interviews. One day, however, their conversations became so absorbing and time passed so quickly, the princess forgot to attend the fire and went out. Lagri, on her return, soon found the neglect, and seemed only to be too pleased to have the opportunity of showing her spite to a lovely prisoner. She ordered Fairer than a Fairy to start a new day at dawn to ask Locrinos for fire, which to relight the one she had allowed to go out. Now this Lacrinus was a cruel monster who devoured anyone who came across, especially enjoyed a chance of catching and eating any young girls. Our heroine obeyed with great sweetness, and without having been able to take leave of her lover, she set off to go to Lacrinus as to certain death. As she was crossing a wood, a bird sang to her to pick up a shimmering petal, which she would find in a fountain close by, and use it when she needed. She took the bird's advice, and in due time arrived at the house of Lacrinus. Luckily she only found his wife at home, who was much struck by the princess's youth and beauty and sweet gentle manners, still and further impressed by the presence of the shining pebble. She readily let Fairer than a Fairies have the fire, and in return for the stone she gave her another, which she said might prove useful some day. Then she sent her away without doing any harm. Legree was at such surprised as displeased at happy results of the expedition, and Fairer than Fairy waited anxiously for an opportunity of meeting Prince Rainbow and telling him her adventures. She found, however, that he had already been told about them by a fairy who protected him, and whom he was related. The dread of the fresh dangers to his beloved princess made him devise some convenient way of meeting them by the garden or fountain, and Fairer than Fairy carried out his plan daily with entire success. Every morning she placed a large basin full of water on her window-sill, and soon as the sun's rays fell on the water, the rainbow appeared as clearly as it had ever done in the fountain. By this means they were able to meet without losing sight of the fire, with the 2 bottles in which the old fairy kept her eye and her tooth at night. That's funny. And for some time the lovers enjoyed every hour of sunshine together. One day Prince Rainbow appeared in the depths of woe. He had just heard that he was to be banished from his lovely spot, but he had no idea where to go. The poor young couple, with despair, only parted with the last ray of sunshine, in hopes of meeting next morning. Alas! Next day was dark and gloomy, and it was only late in the afternoon. The sun broke through in the clouds for a few minutes. Fairer than a Fairy eagerly ran to the window, but in her haste she upset the basin and spilled all the water which had carefully filled it overnight. No other water was at hand except in the 2 bottles. It was the only chance of seeing her lover before they were separated. She did not hesitate to break the bottles and pour the contents into the basin. When the rainbow appeared, at once their farewells were full of tenderness. The prince made the most ardent and sincere protestations, and promised to neglect nothing which might help to deliver his dear Fairer than a Fairy, from her captivity, and implored her to consent to the marriage as soon as they should both be free. The princess on her side vowed to have no other husband, and declared herself willing to brave death itself in order to rejoin him. Oh, Percy. Can you hold the book? Oh, yes. I'm good. Alright. I can just see where I left off. They were not allowed much time for their adieus. The rainbow vanished, and the princess resolved to run all risks. Started off at once, taking nothing with her but her dog, her cat, a sprig of myrtle, and the stone which the wife Lacrinus gave her. When Legree became aware of her prisoner's flight, she was furious, and set off at full speed in pursuit. It's actually kind of scary. She overtook her just as the poor girl, overcome by fatigue, had lain down to rest in a cave which stone had formed itself into a shelter to shelter her. The little dog was watching her mistress promptly flew at Legree and bit her so severely that she stumbled against a corner of the cave and broke off her only tooth. Oh my goodness. Before she had recovered from the pain and rage this caused her, the princess had time to escape and was some way on her road. Fear gave her strength for some time, but at last she could go no farther, and sank down to rest. As she did so, the sprig of myrtle she carried touched the ground, and immediately a green, shady bower sprang up around her, in which she hoped to sleep in peace. But Legree had not given up her pursuit, and arrived just as the fairy had fallen fast asleep. This time she made sure of catching her victim, but the cat spied her out, and springing from one of the boughs of the arbor, she flew at Legree's face and tore out her only eye. Oh my goodness. Now, thus delivering the princess forever from her persecutor. One might have thought that all would now be well, but no sooner had Legree been put to flight than our heroine was overwhelmed with hunger, thirst. She felt as though she could certainly expire, and was with... Oh, sorry. I'd do something. She felt it, as though she should certainly expire, and it was with some difficulty that she dragged herself as far as a pretty little green and white house, which stood at no great distance. Here she was received by a beautiful lady dressed in green and white to match the house, which apparently belonged to her, which she seemed only inhabitant. She greeted the fainting princess most kindly, gave her an excellent supper, and after a long night's rest in a delightful bed, told her that, after many troubles, she would finally attain her desire. As the green and white lady took leave of her princess, she gave her a nut, desiring her only to open it in the most urgent need. After a long and tiring journey, Fairer than Fairy was once more received in a house, and by a lady exactly like the one she had quit. Here again she received a present with the same injunctions, but instead of a nut, this lady gave her a golden pomegranate. The mournful princess had to continue her weary way, and after many troubles and hardship, she had again found rest, shelter in a third house exactly similar to the other two others. Now, these houses belonged to three sisters, all endowed with fairy gifts and all alike in mind and person, and they wished the houses and garments to be equally alike. Their occupation consisted in helping those in most misfortune. Now, and they were as gentle, as benevolent as Legree, and had been cruel and spiteful. The third fairy confronted the poor traveller, begged her not to lose heart, and assured her that trouble should be rewarded. They accompanied her advice by the gift of the crystal-smelling bottle, with strict orders only to open it in case of urgent need. Fairer than Fairy thanked her warmly and resumed her way, cheered by pleasant thoughts. After a time, her road led through a wood full of soft airs and sweet odours, and before she had gone 100 yards, she saw a wonderful silver castle suspended by strong silver chains to 4 of the largest trees. It was so perfectly hung that gentle breeze rocked it sufficiently to send you pleasantly to sleep. Fairer than Fairy felt a strong desire to enter this castle, but besides being hung a little above the ground, there seemed to be neither doors nor windows. She had no doubt, though, really I cannot think why, that the moment had come in which to use the nut which had been given to her. She opened it, and out came a diminutive hall porter, at whose head hung a tiny chain, the end of which was a golden key as long as the smallest pin you ever saw. The princess climbed up upon the silver chains, holding in her hand the little porter, who, in spite of his minute size, opened a secret door with his golden key and let her in. She entered a magnificent room which appeared to be occupied the entire castle, and which was lighted by gold and jewelled stars in the ceiling. In the midst of the room stood a couch, draped with curtains of all colours and rainbows, and suspended by golden cords so that it swayed with the castle in a manner which rocked its occupant delightfully to sleep. On this elegant couch lay Prince Rainbow, looking more beautiful than ever, and sunk in profound slumber in which he had been held ever since his disappearance. Meow. Fairer than Fairy, who now saw him the first time in his real shape, hardly dared to gaze at him, fearing lest his appearance might not be in keeping with the voice and language which had won her heart. At the same time, she could not help feeling rather hurt at the apparent indifference in which she was received. She related all the dangers, difficulties she had gone through, and though she repeated the story 20 times in a loud, clear voice, the prince slept on, took no heed. She then had recourse to the golden pomegranate, and on opening it found all the seeds were so many little violins, which flew up in the vaulted roof and at once began playing melodiously. I don't know how to say that. The prince was not completely aroused, but he opened his eyes a little and looked all the handsomer. Impatient at not being recognized, Fairer than Fairy now drew out her third present, and opening the crystal scent bottle, the little siren flew out, who silenced the violins and then sang close to the prince's ear the story of all his lady love had suffered in her search for him. Meow. She added some gentle reproaches to her tale, but before she had to go far, he was wide awake and transported with joy threw himself at the princess's feet. At the same moment, the walls of the room expanded and opened out, revealing a golden throne covered with jewels. A magnificent court was now being assembled, and at the same time, several elegant carriages filled with ladies in magnificent dresses drove up. Now, in the first and most splendid of these carriages sat Prince Rainbow's mother. She fondly embraced her son, after which she informed him his father had been dead for some years, that the anger of the fairies was at length appeased, and that might return in peace to reign over his people, who were longing for his presence. Now, the court received the new king with joyful acclamations, which would have delighted him in any other time, but all his thoughts were full of Fairer than Fairy. He was just about to present her to his mother, and the court, feeling sure that her charms would win all the hearts, when the 3 green-white sisters appeared. They declared the secret of Fairy than a Fairy's royal birth, and the queen taking the 2 lovers in her carriage to set off with them for the capital of kingdom. Here they were received with tumultuous joy. Their wedding was celebrated without delay, and succeeding years diminished neither the virtues, beauty, nor the mutual affection of the King Rainbow and his queen, Fairer than a Fairy. Alright. The Good Wife's Midnight Labors. Funny little thing. Alright. Well, I'll be right back. I've got to go use the restroom. So. Alright, I'm back. The Good Wife's Midnight Labors. There was once a good wife who was so stirring and notable that she would test neither by night nor by day. In the daytime, when the meals were cooked and the house was ridded up and the animals fed, she would wander about and gather wisps, well, the wool caught on the brambles, and at night she would guard them and spin them and weave them and make them up into coats for her man and the bairns. But it was weary work, and one night, as she sat up, long after everyone was abed, she threw down her spindle and cried out, "O Owen, body make hard, card, spin, all day, all night. And what thanks will she get, or help? I'm sure I'd be willing enough to take help from any living thing. 'Tis a foolish thing to say, for trouble may always be had for the asking. The words were hardly out of her mouth when there was a knock on the door. The good wife went to open it, and outside stood the queerest wee body with a green gown and white mutch. "Save us, who's there?" said the good wife. "Tall quarry, good wife," said the old woman. "Well, hey, you'll get," and she crossed over to the fire and began the card. There was another knock, and the good wife cried out, "Who's there?" "Tall quarry," said another voice. "Well, hey, you'll get." And another old woman, like the first, came in and began to spin. She had hardly started when the third came, who made the same reply and settled down to weave. The good wife was watching them in some alarm when the door opened again, and the fairy boy came in, followed by such a warm swarm that you might have thought that all the fairies in Scotland were there. They carded and spun and wove and boiled the cloth in the fulling pot like mad. The house was full of the racket of them, for they had hands, they had mouths as well, and all the time they worked. They clamoured for food. The good wife ran to bake bannocks for them, but as fast as one was cooked, it was snatched off the fire, and still the clamour went on. At length the good wife left her cookery and ran to ask her husband what she should do. To her horror, he lay like a log, and shake him as she might, she could not waken him. It was plain that he was bewitched. The good wife was at her wit's end, until she thought of consulting a wise man who lived near. Well, she pulled her shawl over her head and hurried out to the house. Luckily this wise man was but just gone to bed, and he thrust his head out of the window and listened to her story. "Aweel, there's but one thing to do," he said. "If the good neighbours have been fooling, throw the fueling water over him and he'll maybe waken. But you must get them out from the house first. Meow. And Snai, keep them out. Go back as ye came. Come up to the door, cry out. The Berg Hill is afire. That's where they stay. Ye kin." Well, that's interesting wording. "And they'll run out to save what they value most. But mind this, it will not use to turn them out. If ye cannot keep them out, so undo all that they have done, all the things they have worked on will rise and open them." The good wife thanked the wise man and ran as fast as she could to her own house. She flung the door open and cried, "The Berg Hill's afire! The Berg Hill's afire!" At once there was a great clatter and clamour, and the good people swarmed past her, each crying out the name of the most prized possession. No sooner had they gone than the good wife slammed the door, began to destroy every trace of their work. Well, she pulled the fulling water off the fire and tore the web of cloth, loosed the band of spinning wheel and turned the distaff upside down, burnt the carded wool and put the cartons in the press. She had barely finished when the fairies knocked at the door. "Let us in, good wife, while we get ill hay." Well, okay. Alright, I guess they're like little spirits. Interesting. "That I'll not," said the good wife. "Once is enough for this while." While we spun on, cried the fairies through the keyhole, "Rise and let us in." A squeaking, wheezy voice came from the spinning wheel. "I canna let ye in, for the good wife's louse my band. This is interesting, to say the least. Gardens, gardens, rise and let us in, said the fairies again, and a small hoarse voice said, Who can I rise when she's locked me in the press and put my wool on the fire? Loom that we worked on, rise up and let us in, they cried again, and soft, tongueless voices said, Who can ye ask me, tay rise when me web's torn and me haddle's lying on the ground? At that the good wife laughed, and the fairies cried out, Bannocks that we baked, rise up and let us in. The good wife gave a shriek, for she had forgotten the bannocks. There was one little barely bannock cooking on the fire. At last the fairies had set there, and it got up and began to roll towards the door. Well, but the good wife nipped it between a finger and thumb, and fell to the ground, for it was but half baked. At that the fairies cried out tauntingly, Aha, good wife, look till your man. Ye'll no get your man to waken. Sir enough, as they cried out. Well, the good man began to toss and mutter like one mad. The good wife wrung her hands again. Then she remembered the wise man's counsel, and ran to fetch the falling water. As she dashed the water over her husband, the fairies all about the house set up a dismal cry and fled. Well, and the man awakened, as well as he had ever been. As for the good wife, she was careful, after this, never to wish for a thing unless she knew what she was wishing for. Well, it's kind of a short story. The Brownie of Fernon. Many brownies there have been in Scotland, and one of them was known as the Brownie of Fernon. Now Fernon was a farmhouse. It had its name from the glen or den near which it stood, for anyone who wished to reach the farm had to pass through this glen. All around the country folk believed that the brownies lived in the glen. Never would he appear to anyone in the daytime, but it was said he was sometimes seen at night. He would steal about like an ungainly shadow, moving from tree to tree to keep them from being seen. And he never did harm anybody, this Brownie of Fernon. Indeed, like all good brownies, they were properly treated and let alone. The Brownie of Fernon was always on the lookout to do good, turn to those in need for his help. Well, the farmer of Fernon did not know what it would ever do without this brownie. If he had any farm work to be finished in a hurry, it would be done. The brownie would thrash his grain and winnow it, tie it up into bags. He would cut the turnips too, and for the farmer's wife he would wash the clothes, work the churn and weed the garden. Well, all that the farmer and his wife had to do was leave open the door of the barn, or the turnip shed, or the milk house, when they went to bed, and they must put down a bowl of new milk on the doorstep for the brownie supper. When they woke the next morning, the bowl would be empty. The job would be finished better than it had been done by mortal hands. Well, now all of this should have proved how gentle and kindly this brownie was, but all the workers on the farm had the fear of him. They would go miles around in the dark, coming home from kirk on the Sunday, or market day, to avoid passing through the brownie's glen and catching a sight of him. Well, the farmer's lady herself was so good and gentle housewife that she felt no fear of the brownie. When the brownie's supper was left outside, it was she who would fill his bowl with the richest of milk, and she would add a good spoon full of cream to it, too. Well, said she, he works hard for us, right enough, and never asks for wages. Well does he deserve the very best meal we can set for him. One night this gentle lady was taken ill, and everyone was afraid she might die. Well, her husband took it hard, indeed, and so too did her servants. Such a good mistress she had ever been to them, and they loved her as if they were their mother. Now she was that bad that they were all for sending for old nurse who lived miles off on the other side of the glen. Well, who was to go fetch her? That was the question. It was a black midnight when the lady fell ill, and the only way to the old nurse's house lay straight through the glen. Whoever travelled the road would run the risk of meeting the brownie. The farmer himself, well, would have gone well enough, but he dared not to leave his house, his wife. So the timid servants, they stood about in the kitchen, each telling the other that he was the one to go, and no one of them offered to go himself. Little did they know that the brownie, who was the very cause of their fear, was hiding only a few feet from them. In the entry outside the kitchen, there he crouched, a queer wee man, all covered with hair. He had a long beard and red-rimmed eyes. His broad feet were webbed like those of a duck, and his long arms touched the ground even when he stood up. Well, the brownie, with his face all anxious, tried to hear the words. He had come as usual from his home in the glen to see if there was any work for him to do, and to look for his bowl of milk. He knew fine that something now was wrong inside the farmhouse. Usually at this late hour all was dark and still, but here were the windows lit up, the door wide open. The brownie learned from the servants Jabber that his kind mistress, whom he loved so dearly, was deathly ill. He became sad indeed, and when he found the silly servants were full of their fears, they dared not go for the nurse. His anger grew far greater than their fear. Well, fools and idiots, he muttered, stamping his queer flat feet. They talk if the brownie would take a bite right off them. If the like of them only knew the bother they give me to keep out of their way, they would not be so silly. By my troth, if they keep on like this, the bonny lady will die amongst their fingers. It strikes me that the brownie must away himself for the nurse. Up he reached with his hand and took down from its peg on the wall Farmer's great dark cloak. Hiding under it, he hurried onto the stable, to saddle and bridle the farmer's fleetest horse. Well, when the last buckle was fastened, the brownie led the horse out of the stable and scrambled up onto his back. If ever you have flown, fly fast now, begged the brownie. It was as if the horse understood the brownie. It gave a quick whinny, picked up its ears, and darted in the darkness like an arrow from a bow. In less time than the distance had ever been travelled before, the brownie came to the old woman's cottage. Now the nurse, of course, was in bed asleep. The brownie had to rap sharply on her window. When she rose and put her old face close to the glass and asked who was there, he told her quickly where he had come at this late hour. You must come with me, good wife, that at once, he commanded in a deep voice. If the lady of Fernon is to be saved, there's no one to nurse her at the farm, save a lot of silly servants. But how shall I get there? Have they sent a cart for me? Asked the old woman. As far as she could see, there was nothing at the door, save the horse and its rider. Nay, they have sent no cart, replied the brownie. You must just climb up behind me and on the saddle and hang on tight. I promise to land you in Fernon safe and sound. Well, the brownie's voice was so commanding that the old woman dared not refuse to do as she was bid. Besides, she had often ridden thus on a horse when she was a lassie, so she made haste to dress herself and soon unlocked her door. She climbed up behind the stranger who was almost hidden in his dark cloak. She clasped him tightly and they wore off. Not a word was spoken between them till they neared the glen. Then the old woman began to feel her courage giving away. Do you think we might meet the brownie? She asked timidly. I've no fancy to run the risk. The folks say that he is an unchancy creature. Well, the brownie gave his odd laugh. Keep up your heart and cease
talking foolishly," he said. "I promise you there will be not uglier than this night, than a man you ride behind." "Oh, good on you, then. I'm fine and safe," said the old woman. "I've not seen your face, but I warrant you are a true man, for the care you've taken the poor lady of Fernon." She fell into silence again until they had passed through the glen, and the good horse had turned into the farmyard. Meow. The brownie now slid to the ground. Turning around, he carefully lifted her down with his long, strong arms, but as he did so the cloak slipped off him. She saw a strange, short body. "All in the world. What kind of man are you?" Meow. The old woman asked. She peered into his face in the greying light of the morning. "What makes your eyes so big, and what have you done to your feet? They are more like duck's webs than aught else." The queer little brownie laughed. "I've walked many miles without a horse to help me. Now I've heard it said too much walking makes the feet unshapely. But waste no time in talking now, good dame. Go into the house, and if anyone asks who brought you hither so quickly, tell them, they who fear the brownie, that there was a lack of men to help the good mistress. You had to ride here behind this brownie over and then." Meow. I kind of like that story. The Fairies. Up the airy mountain, down the rushy glen, we daren't go hunting for fear of little men. Oh, this is a poem. We folk, good folk, trooping all together, green jacket, red cap, and white owl's feather. Down along the rocky shore, some make their home. They live on crispy pancakes of yellow tide foam. Some in the reeds of the black mountain lake, with frogs for their watchdogs all night awake. Oh, he looks kind of jolly. Oh, I kind of like this artwork. High on the hilltop the old king sits. He is now so old and grey, he's nigh lost his wits. With bridge of white mist, Columb Kill he crosses, honest stately journeys from Sleevely to Rosses, or going up with music on cold starry nights to sup with the queen of the gay northern lights. They stole little Bridget from 7 years long. When she came down again, her friends were all gone. They took her lightly back between the night and morrow. They thought that she was fast asleep, but she was dead with sorrow. They have kept her ever since, deep within the lake, on a bed of flag leaves, watching till she wake. By the craggy hillside, through the mosses bare, they planted thorn trees for pleasure here and there. Is any man so daring as dig them up in spite? He shall find the sharpest thorns in his bed at night. Up the airy mountain, down the rushy glen, we daren't go hunting for fear of little men. We folk, good folk, trooping all together, green jacket, red cap, and white owl's feather. More about fairies. For thousands of years, people have told stories and sung songs about magical creatures. Some think and share with earth with us. The creatures we all call fairies include brownies, elves, and other little folk. Fairy stories were not originally meant for children. Scottish dolls told the brownie of Fernon aloud to each other. Mademoiselle de la Force wrote "Fairer than a fairy" for the other wealthy French ladies at the end of the 1600s. Charles Perrault's Cinderella, the Sleeping Beauty, and the Puss in Boots were enjoyed by the same audience. By the 1800s, writers like Hans Christian Andersen were writing stories meant specifically for children, but adults remained interested in fairies too. Soon after cameras were invented, one man claimed to have photographed tiny winged fairies in his garden. That would have been a dangerous act. Anyone who knows fairy lore understands that fairies generally prefer not to be looked at. Wow. The word fairy meant a place before it meant a kind of creature. Poets and storytellers would say that something was of fairy, from the land of fairy, meaning that it was magical or enchanted. Only later did it mean that the inhabitants of the land, in the 19th century, wealthy landlord owners took over many small farms in Scotland and Ireland to gaze their vast herds of sheep. Forced to move towns or cities, people told fewer of the old stories. Well, the sheep of the day, fairies, the farmers used to say. But people still tell the old stories about fairies and continue to make it up new ones. Fairies may not be easy to live with, but we don't want to live without them either. A world without magic and danger would be boring. That's true. Stories of fairies remind us how unpredictable and interesting the world really is. And they remind us that we must have times of struggle before we can have happy endings. Alright. Well, that looks like that's everything. Well, I guess that's going to be it for this. I hope you liked the reading of this book. The Book of Fairies. Alright, well, I hope you have a good night's sleep, a good day, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye. Meow.